Welcome to a casual review. Today we're going to talk about Irvin Yalom's Existential Psychotherapy. The title is in French because I've read it in French, and I wanted to talk about this book for a very long time as I think it gives incredibly good basis if you are working yourself to become a therapist or even as a patient. Even maybe it might be a little quite off-putting given the size, but it's a very good book. It gives what I would consider to be the fundamentals of psychodynamic work. Even though it's existential, I feel that it gives a better understanding of the human condition than would any other book by purely psychoanalytic standards. What I mean by that is basically it gives the four principles of existential therapy, the four givens of the human condition, as Yalom points out, meaning that there is the question of death, obviously, in which the end point, question of isolation, we are alone and something we have to deal with, even though we might have people around us, surrounding us, it's not the point. The point is that we are the only ones experiencing our lives and the only ones making choices in our lives. And as such, it renders us, in a way, single, unique, but also alone, and how we deal with the problem. There's also the question of meaning, whether we found our purpose in meaning, where is the meaning? Also, meaning confronted to the absurdity of life, meaning that does life even have a meaning, or is it just a farce to not quote, but to get close to ideas of like Camus or Sartre? And we're just condemned to try and find meaning out of that nothingness. There is also the idea of freedom, which might sound self evident, but it really isn't. It's about taking freedom in our world, in our life, and also the corollary of those freedoms is responsibility for one's choices, for the lack of agency or the agency we have in our world. And in this book, he goes into incredible detail about all of this. And he makes a point that it's four givens, but they're much more intertwined than what the fairy lets go. But that's the whole, I feel, the whole incredibleness of this book is that he makes a very simple argument. He's not trying to go into, how can I say, into something very complex. He's really trying to ground it so we get the best understanding possible. And I feel that Yalom manages it incredibly well, like on point managing. And I felt very inspired by this book, as this book, I feel, has given me the basics of what it is and has also opened my scope to the existential perspective. Because even though I've read people before like Rollo May, they don't quite, how can I say, they don't quite pinpoint things as Yalom does. Yalom gives an overarching basis to existentialism, like a 4 point, like a formula, even though he would never call it that, and I would never call it that. But let's say he like breaks it down to its core elements. Other existentialists are much more on the creative side, where they don't necessarily pinpoint, but they say this, there is that. The fundamental greatness of this book is that it compartmentalizes and gives us an easy and thorough understanding of those issues, of all those myriad of issues covered by Rollo May, Kierkegaard, Sartre, Camus, and they break them down into easily digestible points and things that do impact you and I directly usable with the patient, because that's also what this is about. It's not just a work of theory, it's a work meant to help you deal with patients. And as such, he does go into a lot of detail. And there's also something that I find very commendable is that he also goes into the patient therapist relationship, how it should be, how it was in the past, meaning those old schools of psychoanalysis where there used to be a very thorough setting, where the analyst used to be very cold. He's not into that. He is into the therapeutic alliance and the idea that basically the therapist and the patient are basically two travelers that do a bit of the, how can I say, work together, but that's what they are. They're two side by side travelers. They're not, the therapist is not necessarily a guide per se, but a fellow traveler that tries to help when he can. And I found that refreshing, that you're not some kind of superpower fantasy, you're just a person trying to help another person with, of course, a set of tools, knowledge, and experience that helps this easen up and make it so much better. But it's not about some fantasy. It's very honest, very good. And I find that if you're ever interested in psychotherapy, this is the book for you. Like, this is really, I don't think, at least I haven't found anything that quite matches this. If you want an easier version, there is the gift of therapy, which is, I will talk about it at some point, but the gift of therapy is a condensed version, not in any more complicated, even less complicated, but it's also not as detailed, not as rich, not as expansive, obviously, because I think the gift of therapy is in the 200-ish pages, whereas this is virtually 1,000. So you get in a real, I can say, bird's view of everything in gift of therapy. Whereas this, you're really going into the nitty gritty details, and that's wonderful. If you're gonna become a therapist, I think this is a must read. And I don't say that often because I often think that there is how can I say, everyone should read everything that they feel like it, but this is like a 10 out of 10, even though I don't give any ratings to this. But I was very impressed, and I think that this is a wonderful book. I'm so glad to have read it. So anyway, what are your thoughts and what are your feelings about it? Drop off a commentary if you want. I'll see you in the next one. See ya.